And I was thinking actually before we started recording that this is going to be your fourth time on the podcast.
Wow,
Yeah, and
that's
it's
awesome.
like it's interesting. I looked at every time that you've been on, and it's been like a journey through your career, if you like. So like the first time was just a day or two after you ran in Birmingham. You did your sub
Birmingham,
60
yeah.
pro in Birmingham. Um, and then I look back and it was you were in Cologne in 2023 and you were just going to, and it was, I think you were just hopeful of getting a time that was, this is when there was, you just needed one time to qualify.
One time, that's right.
Yeah. And
Yep.
you were going to do that. And it was like the morning before that. And then the next time was just before last year's last chance qualifier
Cologne, yeah, that's
where,
right.
where you went and won. And now you're back and you've
I
already
know, man.
qualified and you're probably, I think, at the moment, the favourite for the World Championships.
Yeah, but like just on that, I sit here sometimes like with Georgie, who's been a part of my journey, Greg, for the whole time, and I'm like, wow, like it was only 2.5 years ago that we probably had our first podcast,
Mm.
which was straight after that Birmingham race. And yeah, it's great to reflect back on it. 2.5 years, and I couldn't have had it any other way, right? Like having to deal with a couple of like not setbacks, but I wasn't immediately in the 15 straight away. I had to work hard, and then as a result, I had to find another way. Hence why I reached out to Anthony, my coach, and now we're here, and my season to date so far, I couldn't have asked for a better season so far, to be honest.
Yeah, and I've noticed as well that you've actually run quite a lot. I know like high result sort of show the number of races that someone's done, and I think sometimes it can get confused if there's more than one James Kelly. But I think it's
Mm.
over like 40 races in that time frame that you've done, which is quite a lot, right? Do you why is that? Like if you contrast it against someone like Hunter, for example, who doesn't run a huge amount, is it just like the enjoyment of racing? Do you like getting race practice? What's the thinking there?
I like my HYROX career. I sometimes think, Greg, that it was before Anthony and after Anthony, right? And it's been I've been with him for 13, almost 14 months now. Before Anthony, um, I thought the best way to do Hyrox was to do Hyrox a lot, not necessarily race, but in training. So I'd compromise run, I'd um, do a lot of like interval style training. Now that I'm with Anthony and we've been on our journey together as a coach and an athlete relationship, I've learned like the power of racing for the experience of racing because what I'm doing and the other 14 Elite 15 athletes that I'm racing against is I'm sorry to say is different to everyone else who's racing in the Hyrox. We are racing, not time trialing. And
Mhm.
I think that's why I race a lot is because I love racing. Like I love the concept of racing against the other the elites and the best of the best. To see how I match up against them. I feel like my body to date, touch wood, has allowed myself to race this much. Um, and I'm the first to say that why would I be training so much to not race if my body allows it to? Um, so so yeah, it's exciting, and also like uh with the new Elite 15 doubles now, that's going to bring on a lot more different types and styles of racing. We can talk about that with Jake Dearden the other day, man. Like I'll be honest with you, that was the toughest race I've ever raced
Oh,
in terms of
really?
the perceived effort. Yeah. Jake pulled me through, man. Jake pulled me through. And so yeah, like obviously out of those races, I've probably raced more than. 2/3 individual, and probably there's a handful of doubles. But yeah, I just love racing, Greg.
What is like one of the questions I've started opening up with on here is like, what is your why for racing in HYROX or any sport? Like, what is the motivator behind it? What keeps you going? What
I
is that
reckon
for
what
you?
we should do, by the way, is I think you ask me this like every time we've been on. I think we should go back and check out my why 2.5 years ago. Um, uh, I knew you were gonna ask this, obviously. Um, my why is because I'm a competitor and I just love to compete. For years and years on end at school, even if I go back 12 years ago or more, like I was competing in and playing every sport under the sun. I'd have a Friday night cross country meet, a Saturday morning rugby game, and then a Sunday Aussie rules game. And that was my life for all my teenagehood. And then after school, I had this urge to continue, obviously, to compete. So I fell in love with Aussie rules football even more, and fell in love with distance running, and did a lot of marathons and half marathons, and then obviously that, you know, got myself to high. I got myself to HYROX, and to answer your question, it's because I love competing, and I love competing against myself to try to get the most out of myself. And if I want to sound even more corny, I guess I'm a better person when I'm chasing this a competition, so to speak. I'm a better like um, partner and son and friend, even when I've got so much like energy behind a goal. So I think that's my why. It's because I need it myself. Yeah.
Nice. You touched on the race with Jake, but let's start with the recent race in Glasgow where you won the Elite 15, 1 second off the world record ultimately. Does that feel like your best race ever?
That is an interesting question, and yeah, it's one of them. I think my world champs last year, quite frankly, um, has like was and is still one of my best races. But the way I felt in Glasgow, definitely like um, I felt pretty good, and yeah, I and Anthony knew something like that was on the horizon to at some point in time, and the night and how it unfolded, like, and the course and how I played it allowed me to do what I did. It's interesting though, Greg, like as you know, and probably all the listeners that are listening to this know, that every HYROX race is different. As much as they do a lot in there, or like they try to do as much as they can to make everything consistent. Every race is different, so I try not to compare any race to another one. I could try to compare my Glasgow race to my Cologne race, which I ran like a 54:03, and the feeling of it is very is very similar. But you still can't really compare because the races itself are very, very different. But yeah, it'll be one that I cherish forever. Um, Perspective is very interesting. If you ask me this, if you ask me that question 12 hours after the race, I probably would have said something like, "No, it was the worst race of my life," because I was so gutted that I was 1 second off the world record, right? And that's me being, that's that like I was just annoyed more than anything. But as time goes on, I'm pretty proud of that effort. Um, but I'm kind of sneaky. I'm kind of like, and like Anthony and I have spoken about it a lot. Like, there's a part of me that is glad that I didn't necessarily get it as well. Yeah.
Keep the fire burning a little bit more.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Mm, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you know you were potentially on for the world record, and if so, at what point?
No, like I've got that question a lot. The first time was when I was running into the wall balls. So when I was
Yeah,
running in the rock zone into the wall balls, because Faisal on the mic obviously announced it. Oh man, and like it's one of those moments where like I I heard it and then I think I did see the clock and in my eyes the clock said 49 something. And I don't think I've ever like no, I know for a fact I've never gone into the wall balls under 50. So I was like, maybe I am on for a a good showing and yeah, like hindsight's a it's a nightmare sometimes because like I look back at it and I'm like, James, why didn't you just hold on to that ball even a fraction more, right? But as I said to you, there's a part of me that thinks it was a blessing in disguise.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So then you basically got on a plane, flew to Houston, and then went and basically qualified for the Elite 15 doubles with Jake Dearden,
Yeah.
setting the world record in the process. So that
Yeah.
you said earlier, that's the toughest race ever.
Toughest race I've ever felt, yeah. Because of the intensity that we had to run it at. And we were pushed, Jake and I, right up until the rower. Um, like the boys behind us were really, really pushing us. So we were fighting. Kudos to Jake. I mentioned earlier, Greg. He won't he won't agree with this because uh he's humble. Um, yeah, he's very humble, but he did pull me along. To the point actually, like physically, he ended up being about 5 to 6 seconds ahead of me going into the wall balls, which is we were obviously in the clear, but only by a couple of seconds. But physically, he was able to really hold us together in the back end of the race, which was great. And again, we didn't know we were on world record until the lunges, until we were getting out of the lunges, and he just took off. And I was trying to chase him down, but so mate, that race, as much as it was the toughest that I've experienced in terms of my effort, it's probably one of the most memorable ones to date because of sharing it with Jake, and obviously having the world record as well. But um, we're just super excited to be lining up in the Elite 15 doubles now on the Saturday night at Worlds. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like you're saying this with Jake, like he won the world championships last year in doubles. Like him and Mark Dean were the fastest doubles team. I think I'm right in saying last year. So he's obviously quite well suited to doubles. He's a big guy, and you almost think of doubles as being more purely just for the runners, but it clearly suits Jake quite nicely.
Well, mate, it'll be interesting, Greg. After the Miami race coming up, then Paris and London, and the other qualifying races to see what what types, I guess, athletes
Mm,
make the top three. Give kudos to Marcus Wallace and Dawson, who like they absolutely smashed us on the sleds.
did they?
Um, they got a very extensive lead going into the burpees because they are very strong athletes. And I think naturally, if we're still going to continue to do Elite 15 doubles, I don't think it's going to be the runners that necessarily come out on top. I think it's still going to be a running game, sure, but I think it's obviously like it's the combo of both athletes that is going to be different. Um, and right now, we don't know what type of combo that is the best, whether it
Mhm.
is two runners or whether it is like a more of a strength dominant athlete, or whether it is two strength dominant athletes. Who knows? It's exciting because right now there's only six. If I stand corrected, it's there's only six teams qualified on both the males and the female side, so there's still nine teams to come, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see who's lining up in Chicago.
Yeah, definitely. You've I sort of touched on earlier, like you're probably the favourite for the World Championships now. Certainly one of them. And even though you've been at the top end of the sport for since for the last 2.5 years, it's relatively recently. We can honestly say you are one of the favourites. Has anything? Have you noticed that anything has changed in that time, either in terms of the sponsor opportunities that you're getting, the the crap that you get online, the attitude from other athletes, anything like that? Is it has there been a change? Would you say?
Yes, and I think the change is um, only because of how the sport is evolving itself as well. It's
Mm.
not just because I'm, I guess, one of the favorites to win this year. It's to do with the trajectory of the sport, and on top of doing well so far this year. Um, the sponsor opportunities are still evolving and also getting to a point where I'll be honest, like, and I'm not afraid to say it, I could potentially do this full time without coaching, like pretty easily, which is just great to hear and great to see, and I know for a fact that's not just me at all. I know a lot of the other Elite 15 athletes are in the same in the same realm. So sponsors, yeah, for sure. There's a part of me that think that the opportunities that I've gotten lately, not only sponsorships or racing, but teaming up with Proven and Tia and Shane and the whole Proven team has come off my dedication to my craft. There's a part of me that like when it first came about, Greg, I was like, what's going on? Like 2 weeks ago, I was fangirling Tia-Clair Toomey on YouTube, and here I am now, like joining forces with her. But now I'm proud to say that came about from my dedication of the craft, and I think the difference of how HYROX is now compared to 2.5 years ago when I started, Greg, is if you do want to be at the top of the sport, you can't do it with another um, full-time job, or you can't do it with being 80% all in. You've got to be 100, if not more percent, like all in. So yeah, it has changed, but also I think that's to do with the trajectory of the sport and how it's evolved as well.
I was thinking actually, funnily enough, as well about it's quite a nice like full circle moment, if you like. I don't know if you remember, I was talking to you outside Manchester, and I think it was in January 24, and I was like, I just started to talk to Tia or Tia's publisher about getting her on the podcast, and I was excited about that, and like, and then I was thinking like, blimey, like I've had her on now, I've had Shane on, you're now working with her, and it's like in the last year, like a lot's happened. Just like you say, in the sport, in your career, everything like that. It's exciting. It's exciting.
It's it is very exciting, and I'll be honest, give credit to HYROX as a sport and as a race for get like Tia wants to do HYROX. It's not as if she's doing it for exposure or clout or sponsors. She loves it. Um, so kudos to HYROX for setting something up that the fittest woman on earth ever wants to do this.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, that was only January 2024 when we were having that discussion trying to get Tia involved and whatnot, and here she is now like gonna race with at the World Champs twice, which is
yeah,
fantastic.
yeah. Have you like being around and working with the fittest woman ever, and her coach and everything like that? Is there what have you, and like James Newbury, like, what have you noticed? Is there does their mindset, their attitudes, their approach to training, does that rub off on you in any way? Is there anything you've noticed about them?
Yeah, I definitely think it has. Ever since I've been with Proven and engaged with Tier and Shane, James Newbury as well, as you just said, I feel like I've held myself with a lot more professionalism because I'm surrounded by these professional athletes who have been there, done that. Um, Even like I've learned a lot from Shane and Nick, the CEO of Proven, more so from the concepts of where you're putting your energy and those little cues to make sure that you, as an athlete, you got to understand that everything you do or everything you don't do will end up um, hindering or end up helping your performance at a high level or not. So taking that extra phone call at night when you should be winding down, getting good sleep, or making sure that you're getting that extra hour in the morning, and just conversations like this to the point where making sure you're being deliberate with your time in the gym. I could spend easily 6 hours per day in the gym, but is that me training for 6 hours? No. That's me in the gym for 6 hours. Does that mean me being deliberate for my time? No. So just things like this. And Tia is one of a kind. Um, I've never seen someone so one competitive. I thought I was competitive. Um, she's competitive. And yeah, no, knowing her personally now, it just makes sense what she's done, as an athlete, as a human being. So I think it definitely has rubbed off, being a part of the Proven team. Yeah.
My perception from afar with Tia is that like I thought she was lovely when I spoke to her, very friendly. Same with Shane. And then my guess is as soon as like the start gun goes, it's like a totally different person, and like
It's
just ultra competitive at that point, but in day-to-day life, like focused for sure and everything, but also very friendly. But yeah, I think when the start gun goes, that changes. Would you say that's fair?
definitely, um, like 100% as soon as the gun goes off, like she will run through a brick wall, like literally.
Yeah.
If you're in her way, like watch out. Um, like learning from that, the only reason why she's like that though is because of being so confident and having faith in her ability to do whatever she can because she's worked so hard at her craft for 10 years now. That's why she's like the way she is. That it's not because um she just puts it on because she wants to. It's because she can, because she's confident and she has faith in in her ability to. And
Mhm.
I know that because we've spoken about it, um and it's more than 10 years. Like she was a superstar runner back in her um um like primary and high school, and then obviously straight after school as well. So yeah, it's been years and years on end of tight like hard work.
Let's talk about your training and racing a little bit more. In I think it was in Amsterdam when we interviewed you for the live stream. Uh, I commented that your compromise running looked good, and you said compromise running doesn't exist. and and then like I've seen you obviously multiple times this year, but in Glasgow, and it may be just be the position we had for the commentary, but like there were times when you were coming out the rock zone, and it was crazy. The pace that you had was unbelievable, and like I looked at Jake and Till a couple of times, and we were just like, wow, like you sprinted past us, including like I remember after the lunges, the pace was unbelievable. So, um, is that something that you like? You work on like the exits from the stations? Is it just a result of your training? Like I know we've sort of spoken with Anthony a little bit about like you do a lot of threshold race work, but it looks like you're going faster than that when you come out the stations. Is it like you're telling yourself it's a psychological thing and you don't need like yeah the legs feel rubbish, but they they'll feel better in a minute's time or anything like that? What's the secret?
Yeah, well, there's no secret. I think for the listeners and for yourself, Greg, my legs are on fire when I'm doing it. I think that's the first thing I'll say. Um, and then also sometimes I think to myself, okay, James, like let's put the brakes on a little bit because it could hinder me in the back end. But I personally think, and I have gone back and watched some of the highlights, I personally think I ran very strongly in Glasgow. Now, the reason is because exactly what I just said about Tia. I have so much faith and confidence in my ability to run that, as you just said, Greg, within 30 seconds to a minute, no matter how my legs are feeling now, I'm gonna find them again. And it doesn't matter if I crawl out of here or sprint out of here, I'm gonna find my legs the same time. So it's literally a mental decision to go, stuff you legs, like I'm running this race. Um, Georgie is the only person that I don't train, we don't train together, but there's a lot of times where she's at the gym when I am, and she's caught she's caught me a few times talking to myself, and that's it's true because I do talk to myself during training, because there's a part of me that challenges myself a lot when it comes to being able to dig deep and just last a little bit longer or go a little bit further or and that's just to do with like enjoying the aftermath more than anything, right? Like I don't enjoy it whilst I'm doing it because it hurts, but I enjoy the aftermath for sure. And I'm not afraid to say it now because I think it's well known that I want to change the way HYROX athletes race this sport. There's so much time to gain on and off the stations. And as I said to you guys in Amsterdam in that interview, like a HYROX race, you're either running or you're doing the station. There's no such thing as compromise running. And if you view it that way, easier said than done, sure. But if you view it that way, you're going to have the mental advantage over anyone in the space. Um, yeah, so yeah, I hope you're picturing me just talking to myself on the treadmill, just looking insane now.
What's the talk? Is it positive? Is it
Oh,
negative? Is it
well, most of the time is, and uh I put myself um in a race when I'm on a treadmill, right? Doing my thresholds. Not every time. It kind of depends on what's coming up. But I put myself in the race and I visualize how I would like the race to unfold coming up, and then I end up surprising myself mentally and going, okay, well, I've even done this once where I told myself I just slipped over. What am I going to do? How am I going to react? And stuff like that, to try to mimic what could happen on race day. Because anything could happen. So yeah, it's positive because I always end up winning. Like I always end up on top. But it it depends on what I end up just thinking about and just coming up in at the time. Yeah, I sound absolutely crazy, don't I?
Yeah, talking about the compromise right now, I just remembered. Do you know? I don't know if you know Keith Barlow from Fittest PR, and I saw him after the Glasgow race, and he said JK's like if you take a dog over to the fields and it can see like another dog in the distance, and like you keep it on the lead, and then eventually you let it off, and it just
Eventually.
like rockets off. That's what you're like when with like the stations are like holding you back, and you can't wait to get running again, and
Yeah,
as soon as you're set free, you're off.
it's a bit like that. I'd rather just um 8.7 kilometers of running.
What's the like you mentioned Anthony a few times, and I should say, by the way, but for people that don't realize, like Anthony Pericini, who's Lauren Wick's husband and JK's coach. But what's the maybe it's hard to say, but is there one thing that you think you've benefit from working with Anthony, like one change in your training, one approach to the training that has benefit you so much?
Yeah, it's definitely um the structured volume, but also I'm actually gonna like say it, the lack of intensity.
Okay.
Right. Now, I'll explain that by what I was doing before Anthony was a lot of intensity and not as much volume. Now it's the reverse. Like to a point, intensity doesn't matter. And when you're training for HYROX, the volume and the threshold training is the most important when when you're 2 or 3 weeks out from a race, sure, like we go into a couple of intense workouts, but um what has truly been the game changer, let's just say, is the volume and the threshold volume as opposed to VO2 max volume. Um I haven't done a VO2 max session for 14 months because we don't need to right now.
Mhm.
Sure, like maybe down the track when I if I end up getting to the point where I out um I need to focus on my anaerobic a little bit more. Sure, we might have to do some overspeed sessions, but yeah, it's definitely the threshold work. Um And also just on that ride, that's the reason why I'm able to run how I can off stations because I'm doing so much work in my threshold zone each week, um, that allows me to flush out lactic acid and promote a fitness level that is promoting flushing out lactic acid quicker than myself producing it. So even not all the time, and I'm assuming like if I had a blood lactate monitor on me and I got pricked after the sleds or after the burpees, I'd probably be over my anaerobic threshold. But because I've done so much work in my threshold zone, I'm able to go back to my steady state of threshold running, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. And I guess the two things that you mentioned, like lack of intensity and structured volume, they're not whatever mutually exclusive things. Like they're
Yeah,
very much linked in that like you couldn't do the structured volume if you still had high intensity in there. It's the lower intensity that allows the higher volume. Is that fair?
definitely. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's how Anthony coaches and preaches, and I get it now. It's been available each day to do the volume that matters. So if you need to slightly decrease your intensity on your HYROX workout today, then do it so that you can train tomorrow. You know,
Mhm.
the volume of the reps, the volume of the running is more important than actually running them at a certain pace, so to speak. Yeah. It's really hard to grasp because we live in this world now of more is, well, what, like, first of all, more is better, and also faster and like um yeah, faster is better and faster is faster, like, but if you start to if you start to try to learn about how to train for fitness, um you got to start from the foundations, and especially with running, and the foundations is the aerobic base, thresholds, and then going up from there.
Yeah. And I guess we live in a world as well where like if you're going to post a workout on Instagram, it's a little bit sexier if it's a tough one where you've killed yourself. And
Oh,
like,
exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was going to say that, Greg, but I felt terrible saying it because like a lot of people do it. But you're right. If you're going to post it, which a lot of people do, which is, hey, like I've done it before myself, you're going to want to put a faster time of doing the workout, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah. What is your we sort of just touched on it in training sessions, but in a race, is there a specific mindset or thing that you rely on? I think you spoke before, like you think about your family in the tough moments in a race. Is that still where your mind might go when things are getting particularly tough?
Yeah, it's funny, Greg, because I remember saying that to you maybe two podcasts ago. I've actually changed it slightly since Anthony, and it's before the race. I think about my family and warming up, and on the start line, I'm thinking about Georgie, my mum and dad, Bernice, and I use that for, I guess, um, motivation and like feeling a little bit like using emotions for motivation. Um, During the race, I've learned to be very um, into what I'm doing at the time and at the present moment. And it might be because I've been able to be a little bit more intuitive with my body because of the type of training I'm doing. I'm really understanding to really harness being in the moment. So if I just remember in Glasgow when I was running, all I was thinking about is taking these corners as quickly as I could. Um, I remember on the sleds, like as soon as I hit the sleds, I just remember my thought process was, okay, like it's feeling good. I'm going to do 2 laps unbroken. Let's split up the third lap. Let's split up the fourth lap. I was really in the moment of what actually I was like the task at hand. So it's interesting because I still do think of my family and Georgie, of course, but it's definitely more so before, like a emotional before to get me motivated. Yeah.
Spoken with a few people in here about similar question, and there's been talk of like not having judgment necessarily on how you're feeling. So if it is particularly hurting, you're not like, oh God, this is hurting, this is horrible. It's more just like that's feedback to the body, and then like you act appropriately. Is that like you sort of just? I think maybe said similar. Like, is it like you're doing okay? I'm going to break up the sleds here. It's not like, oh, this is hurting my legs. Oh shit, this is hurting my legs. Like, what am I going to do? It's more like, okay, this is starting to hurt a little bit now. Now back off. Is that fair to say that that's what you're doing? It's more like you're using it as feedback to adjust the approach to the race.
Definitely, definitely. And I like the word feedback there, Greg, because it's definitely feedback. It's interesting you bring that up. I've been listening to a book called How Bad Do You Want It by Matt Fitzgerald. Not sure if
Mm-hmm.
you've listened to it or read it. He speaks about the concept of perceived effort,
Mm-hmm.
and perceived effort isn't the problem, um, more cases than not. It's how you perceive the perceived effort,
Yeah.
right? So that's where you're going there. Like I agree. Whatever you're feeling is how you're feeling, accept it. And in the moment, you've got two choices in a way. You've got one choice to perceive it negatively or just perceive it as it is, which is positive in my eyes, right? So use it as feedback, sure, but also you don't have to have a response to that effort or to that feeling. It's just the response could be nothing, or the response could be let it, like let the feeling be, if that makes sense. It's hard to understand sometimes, but and also I highly recommend that book, How Bad Do You Want It by Matt Fitzgerald. It's a great, well, I'm listening to it. It's a great listen, yeah.
Yeah. I quite like this topic actually. And I've heard like it talked about stress is similar. Like we can all feel stressed, but your interpretation of what that stress means can be different. And it's if you perceive that stress as a bad thing, then that's when it becomes a problem. But if you see the stress as I'm excited and my body is getting ready for this race and everything like that, then that can be a good thing. But if you're stressing, let's say it is before a race and you're stressing, you're like, oh no, it's I shouldn't feel stressed and this is going to affect my race and everything like that, then it's your interpretation of that stress that makes it the problem, not the stress itself.
Absolutely, because you could pretty much say that your nerves and being nervous for a race is somewhat stressful sometimes, but nerves to me, like if I'm not nervous for a race, something is wrong, right? And it's your ability to perceive it in whatever way you want it, like whatever way you want to. Um, it's funny the word stress, right? Because I think that's another thing that I've learned from Anthony is stress is stress. Your body doesn't know whether it is like stress, whether it is physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, is the same, and your body knows it as just stress. So limiting stress, overall stress leading into a big event is the number one key ingredient. So minimizing as little energy output as possible apart from what you need to get done. Um, Even to a point of making sure your accommodation is as close to the event and the arena as possible so you don't have to walk a mile. Those little things that can help with stress or lack of stress. But yeah, you're right. Like it's all how you perceive it in the end. Um, yeah, it'll be interesting. It'd be interesting to see what the other Elite 15 athletes think about these type of topics, right? Because I'm sure, and the thing is, right, I'm not right, so to speak. I've just got my own opinions and my own perceptions. So be interesting to get the other Elite 15's views on this.
Yeah. I think it wasn't, she didn't say it to me. It must have been on another podcast, but I vaguely remember hearing Lauren Weeks talking about something similar, and her thoughts were like, I've worked, like, say she's feeling particularly tired at the burpees, like she's not going to back off at that point because she's worked, her mind is, I've worked really hard to put myself into a position where I'm feeling this tired, and so like I'm not going to back off because I've worked hard to get to this point. And I thought that was kind of like, that's an interesting way of perceiving the tiredness. It's like, I've worked hard to get to this point, and so like I'm not going to
Yeah.
back off now, which
Yeah.
I thought was good. Yeah,
And I think it may have been the same podcast. She said she said something like she wants to get to that point of her mind asking her the question of slowing down or running towards it. Like that's the whole point. She
yeah,
wants to get to that point, and as soon as she can get to it, like she's kind of cheering, you know.
yeah.
And only someone like Lauren Weeks would say something like that as well, right? Um, yeah, it's these are fascinating topics to me as well, Greg. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Are you have you got any more races planned till Chicago? Like, you've qualified for the elite singles and doubles now. What are your plans between now and then?
So, I haven't planned, but I might be at the Atlanta race, which is the end of April, and just depending on the next couple of weeks of training, I might end up jumping into an individual race then. Anthony and I will discuss that leading into that race. But apart from that, Georgie and I are actually heading to Nashville for 6 weeks before Chicago. So we'll be bunking down with the proven team in Nashville, Tennessee. And that's pretty much the end of April. So we'll be there for all of May, and then apparently Nashville's only an hour and a half flight to Chicago, so it's perfect for us.
Ah, perfect.
That'll be
So
good.
that'll
Yeah.
be you, like you, Tia, Shane, James.
Yep. So Joanna will be there as well. Jess Petro as well, and not only our HYROX team, but the proven team will have many of their CrossFit Game athletes. I'm pretty sure Ricky Garrard will be there, and Jay and Manny Crouch, even Colton Merton, if you know of the
Hmm.
name
Hmm.
Colton Merton. And so, look, it's going to be, I'm going to have to control my ego, to be honest, if I want to try to train with some of those boys. So, it'll be a great environment to lead into a world champs for, I must say.
Yeah, yeah, amazing. One of the questions I've been finishing up on is, what's been your best ever sporting experience? Has that
Mm.
changed for you in recent years, in recent weeks, maybe? I don't know. What jumps out as you for that?
I think still to date, some of my Aussie rules football premierships that I won when I was in my 20s at the Cooperoo Footy Club, those were great memories because they were a part of a team and I was able to experience it, a part of a team. And there's nothing better to be in the change rooms with the boys after a premiership win, and those are very fond memories. I do obviously like hold my third place at the World Champs very highly. And that's not just about my third place. That's my relationship that I've got with Anthony that got me to do that in my eyes. He won't like me saying that because he always says that I've got to do the work. And yeah, sure, but if the work wasn't there, I wouldn't be doing the work. It's a team effort, him and I. So yeah, in terms of the last couple of years, I think yeah, the world champs last year was great. Um and Yeah, it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting this year as well.
Nice, nice. All right. Well, thank you for this. Appreciate it. Maybe the fifth time that you come on here, you will be world champion. So let's
Yeah,
see.
who knows, mate? I wonder
uh,
who else has come on a few times. There'd be a few other people that you've got on a couple times.
I think Hunter's been twice, maybe three times.
Yeah,
Other like otherwise, no, like I'm not sure there's been many that have done three, maybe two,
yeah,
but not
good.
not three.
Yeah,
So
well,
you're streets ahead. If people want to follow you, find out more about you, where's the best place to go now?
probably Instagram, guys. jk.jameskelly on Instagram. And have a look at our proven HYROX program on my link tree as well. So we're just finishing off our first 8 week cycle to then have our next 8 week cycle leading into World Champ. So if you did want to have an 8 week preparation before Worlds, go check out our proven HYROX training program.
Okay, awesome. All right, nice one. Thank you, mate. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Greg. We'll see you at Worlds, mate.
Yes, we'll do.